It's so good to be joined again by Richard Painter, former White House ethics lawyer and professor of law at the University of Minnesota. Richard, welcome back to Lights On.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
So, understandably, the country is outraged at the access that Elon Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, non-existent agency, has to our private information, our social security numbers. This is like a hostile takeover of our government agencies. I'm really curious to know from you, from your experience in White House ethics, what you see. First of all, can we just start with the concept of DOGE and whether this entity has any legal authority to have any access to our information?
Well, Jessica, we don't even know what DOGE is at this point. It was announced as a department. If it's a department, then the head of the department needs to be confirmed by the United States Senate pursuant to the United States Constitution. And Elon Musk has not been confirmed by the Senate for anything. If it's simply an office of the White House rather than a department, then President Trump can appoint Elon Musk just like he can appoint the chief of staff and other senior White House officials to run DOGE inside the executive office of the president. But then all the employees of DOGE, including Elon Musk, are subject to the criminal conflict of interest statute, 18 United States Code 208, which prohibits any government official, any federal official in the executive branch from participating in a United States government matter in which they themselves have a personal financial conflict of interest. And that includes a conflict of interest through a corporation or other entity they own stock or other equity interest in. So Elon Musk is subject to the criminal conflict of interest statute. Everyone who works for DOGE as a United States government employee is also subject to the same statute. And this is a very, very important conflict of interest rule. And that's why it's a violation. It's a crime to participate in a government matter that has a direct and predictable effect on your own financial interest. We'll see what's going on here. But that much we know. But we don't know the exact status of DOGE within the executive branch of the president because they've been playing a cat and mouse game with us now ever since November. They wanted to pretend it was outside the government for a while so that somehow Elon Musk wouldn't have to comply with the financial conflict of interest statute. But now he's been running around doing so much and bossing people around that it's pretty clear he's acting as a federal employee. So they figured they might as well say he's one.
Yeah, they're calling him now, after the outrage of this past weekend, a special government employee, as you said. But clearly, there would be a conflict of interest from the world's richest man, who has countless companies, SpaceX, Tesla. I could go on and on. Tell me, Richard, who would be in charge of enforcing this federal code? Would it be the federal Department of Justice? Because right now it's run by Trump's hatchet for hire, Pam Bondi, as of last night. Is there anyone other than the federal Department of Justice who could enforce this? Could state AGs, in the interest of the constituents of these states and their rights that have been violated, who could enforce this federal criminal statute?
Unfortunately, federal criminal statutes can only be enforced by the United States Department of Justice and by the United States attorneys. Now, this statute does have a 5-year statute of limitations. So it depends on what happens over the next couple of years and whatever is done at DOGE. But if anyone at DOGE participates in the United States government matter that has a direct, predictable effect on their own financial interests, so they know that they're participating in a matter that affects their financial interests or a company they own stock in, they commit a crime. And then anytime over the next 5 years, a federal prosecutor could come into court and charge them in an indictment with that federal crime. So that's the way the federal criminal conflict of interest statute is enforced. Now, rarely are there criminal cases under 18 United States Code 208. Usually these matters are addressed through an inspector general investigation in the department or an investigation by Congress. And one of the problems we've got here is there is no inspector general in the White House. I urged in a book I published in 2009 with Oxford University Press, right after coming out of the Bush White House, that we need an inspector general in the White House. That idea didn't really attract a lot of my friends who were still working in the White House, but I still thought that was a good idea. And this is exactly why. Because if there are violations of a conflict of interest statute like that, or any other waste, fraud, or abuse, we have inspectors general in the agencies who are you report that to and they investigate. Now I know that Donald Trump fired a bunch of them, but in the White House they don't even have one to begin with. So that's one of the problems. Now Congress also should investigate if there is credible evidence of a serious financial conflict of interest high up in the administration. The problem we got now is that members of Congress will not investigate a president of their own political party. And so we have both houses controlled by the Republicans. Donald Trump is the head of the party, and that means he can raise a boatload of cash and for a primary challenge to anybody over in Congress who dares challenge him. So that's a bit of a problem, particularly in the House of Representatives, where they have to run for election every 2 years. But the founders intended that Congress keep the presidency in check, and that includes financial conflicts of interest anywhere in the executive branch.
Richard, I don't know if you're aware, but I led a protest in the beginning of January to urge Congress to block the certification of Donald Trump's presidency under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And the failure to adhere to our Constitution by all lawmakers, frankly, on both sides of the aisle right now is appalling to me. But I feel like, yes, absolutely, the pressure and the should be on Republicans. They control these houses. It is not excusable for them to allow this unchecked invasion of Americans' financial, personal, and financial information, possibly affecting Medicare, Social Security, so many things that affect their lives. But Democrats too bear responsibility. They have bully pulpits. They can hold up nominations. They can make extreme amounts of noise. They could call for the impeachment of Donald Trump. They could call for the arrest of Elon Musk under this criminal statute, couldn't they? Couldn't What kind of noise could the Democrats, who still purport to be on the democracy side in spite of what I think is an abysmal abdication of their constitutional duty on January 6th, what can they be doing to ramp up the pressure here?
Well, the difficulties the Democrats have in the House and Senate are twofold. One, they are in the minority, and the minority under the House and Senate rules has very limited power to initiate investigations. Now, that doesn't mean they can't call witnesses at hearings. They are entitled to call witnesses. And I've been called as a witness by Democrats as well as Republicans in hearings, including when they are in the minority. Just recently in the United States House of Representatives last year with respect to issues in the Interior Department. And so the Democrats can call witnesses. They need to call witnesses who are aggressive and knowledgeable and willing to go to the mat over these issues. And I've had my share of intimidation from some of those senators, like John Kennedy of Louisiana, who was harassing me in a Senate hearing.
What a joke he is.
Oh
What a
yeah,
joke.
fossil fuel money in Congress, and Senator Whitehouse had them all nailed. All that money going into Congress, and Senator Kennedy just wants to ask me questions about things I posted on Twitter about the ethics of the Supreme Court, which are abysmal. And some Marxist blogger, crazy guy on the south side of Chicago, was race baiting, who I shut down. And Senator Kennedy actually went so far as to defend a Marxist in order to try to trash me. And I thought that was pretty humorous. But there's a circus up there on the Hill. And the Democrats need to take these issues seriously and use whatever power they got in the minority. I did feel there were some instances there in the Biden administration is much better than Trump, that's for sure, on ethics. But I got to say they weren't as good as Obama. And there were a few times when the Biden folks need to be reined in, and I wish the Democrats had set a standard. I don't care whether our person is in the White House or not. These are what the rules are, and some of them did. I thought Senator Whitehouse was very, very impressive at the Senate Budget Committee. I just wish he were the chairman right now, but he's not. And we're going to see what happens. But it's going to be a long 4 years. And I got to say, the voters are going to get pretty upset if this absolute craziness continues, because it's going to have a ripple effect on the economy. And the minute Donald Trump started talking about sending troops to Gaza, I thought, okay, well, he could really be digging his grave there.
It's unbelievable. He is promoting ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and building real estate developments that I'm sure his family would have massive investments in. But you talk about the outrage of the American people. Yesterday, thousands showed up in front of the Treasury Department to protest Elon Musk's government influence. There today are people in almost every state capital, 50 states, 50 protests, protesting this hostile takeover of our government, this fascist takeover by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Richard, I really think that I will be shocked if we get to 4 years without some major eruption. And we're trying. I know me on my show, and the civil disobedience that I am encouraging is to try to keep us from something much worse. Try to use the laws that we actually have, the Constitution, the ethics rules, the criminal code, anything to possibly keep us from a very severe eventuality. I think that Donald Trump should be impeached and removed, and that the Democrats should be calling for that right now. It's time to take the gloves off, throw out the rule book, and do what's needed. But we've talked about some criminal remedies. We've talked about congressional oversight. I know you've seen this lawsuit that was filed by AFL-CIO. I'll just read from the first paragraph. It says, Plaintiffs Alliance for Retired Americans, American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO, and Service Employees International Union, AFL-CIO, file this action against defendant Scott Bessent in his official capacity as Secretary of the Treasury, the Department of the Treasury, and the Bureau of the Fiscal Service Agencies of the U.S. for declaratory and injunctive relief to halt defendants' unlawful, ongoing, systematic, and continuous disclosure of personal and financial information contained in defendants' records to Elon Musk and other members of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or to any other person. Richard, what are your thoughts on civil actions? I know that the privacy law isn't your specialty, but what are your thoughts on civil actions that anybody affected could bring to thwart this behavior?
Well, to have standing in federal court, you want to show that you are affected by illegal conduct of the United States government. And if they are leaking your confidential information, your private information, handing it over to private entities out of the Treasury Department, then that's a serious issue. And there are laws that prohibit that. There are also laws that prohibit even the White House from obtaining people's personal tax returns without authorization. And these laws that are designed to protect the privacy of the American people need to be complied with. And so I think it's going to be absolutely critical to hold the federal government accountable. And that means going into court and filing a lawsuit. And the judge can find out what records were released and whether records were illegally released. And also, I think the administration needs to go into court and clarify exactly what DOGE is, who's a United States government employee, an employee of the executive office of the president, and who is not, because turning over records to people who are not at all United States government employees would be a very, very serious matter. And indeed, as I said before, there's some records that the White House itself should not be getting. So courts need to enforce the law, and plaintiffs who do have standing should bring suits. Now, those who don't have standing shouldn't. Now, I will say that any member of the public has the right to sue under the Freedom of Information Act for information. People can sue there. And then also, Elon Musk right now is a so-called special government employee, which means he's subject to that criminal conflict of interest statute, but he can file a private, confidential financial disclosure form, which means we don't get to see. Now, the real question is he really a special government employee, which is really a designation for part-time government employees who have a very limited role for the United States government? Or has he assumed a position that really is that of a full-time officer of the executive branch appointed by the president, who should be confirmed by the Senate, and also needs to have a publicly available financial disclosure form? The special government employees are only allowed to work through 130 days in any one 12-month calendar, period. So he goes over 130 days. I think somebody go in there in court and say, look at what he's doing and look at the time he's spending here. And it counts toward that 130 days any day you do anything. And I don't think there's a day, including a weekend, in which Elon Musk is going to keep his hands off the federal government.
They've
So
literally moved people in. He's got beds,
yeah,
sofa beds in Treasury. He's sleeping in the White House. I mean, this guy is 24/7 infected into our
he's
business.
all over it. So 131 days from now, I mean, someone would go into court and say he's not a special government employee. That's a bunch of hooey. One, he's working more, and second, he's carrying on functions that really are for a primary official of the United States government, an operating official of the United States government, head of a department that need to be confirmed by the Senate. But at minimum, I, the plaintiff, have standing to insist on seeing his financial disclosure form. It should no longer be confidential. It should be disclosed. Remember, the top 100 people in the White House, commissioned officers, have to file publicly available financial disclosure form. I did when I was in the White House. Mine was publicly available. It didn't have anything on it that was very interesting, like Elon Musk. But then again, I'm not a billionaire. But the point is that is publicly available for any commissioned officer in the White House. And yet Elon Musk's financial disclosure form will be hidden away, squirreled away somewhere in the White House if he bothers to fill it out, because he's a special government employee. I think there's going to be some courtroom challenges to that, maybe 4 months or so, or 5 months down the road.
When you say we can file FOIA lawsuits, what should people be asking for in these FOIA lawsuits?
Well, I think the best plaintiffs are often journalists, or people running podcasts such as yourself, and you should ask for the records of the interface, the interactions between the government agencies and the Department of Government Efficiency. It's difficult to get records from inside the White House, because then they'll say, "Oh, that's all executive privilege. We ought to be able to advise the president and not disclose it. We're going to say it's executive privilege, and we won't turn it over." So it's difficult to FOIA the White House in a lot of circumstances. But you FOIA Treasury, and you say, "We want your communications with DOGE, and we want records about what's going on with DOGE, the relationship with DOGE and the Treasury Department." Quite a bit of that you could get through FOIA, through the Freedom of Information Act. And I think those types of suits ought to people ought to start thinking about what they can request under the Freedom of Information Act. And if they're told no, think about where they actually have cause to file an action and ask a judge to order the administration to turn it over.
Let's bring this conversation full circle. We started with a criminal code about financial conflicts of interest. You talked about access if we find out through, it sounds like, discovery or FOIA requests, through some manner in the courts, that non-government employees have accessed our personal information, which I think is very, very likely at this point. Is there not a criminal statute for that?
There are some criminal statutes for that, depending on who the personal information is disclosed to and whether that person was authorized. As I said before, tax returns, not even the president can demand a tax return. He can't call over and say, "Well, I want George Soros's tax return, and so I can take a look at it." The president's not allowed to do it. There are criminal statutes that constrain that. It all depends on the information that is disclosed and whether they're criminal or civil remedies. But we have to identify the information that's disclosed and see if somebody has standing to go into court and file a civil lawsuit or complain to the authorities. The problem with criminal statutes, once again, is they're only enforced by the United States Department of Justice. And right now, DOJ probably is busy prosecuting a lot of Democrats or whatever they're doing. So they may not get around to it for 4 years.
Richard,
So
do you see any circumstance under which state AGs, Democratic state AGs, could bring an action related to Elon Musk's behavior with DOGE right now?
I believe civil suits can be brought by the state attorney general. Yes, civil suits, and already we've had quite a few civil suits against the Trump administration by state attorneys general.
Yeah.
For injunctive relief, for illegal conduct of the United States government that violates the rights of the states or the citizens. And a lot of states, the flow of money, revenue sharing to the states is going to be affected by this. So they absolutely have standing there. Criminal suits, that's a little different issue. It's a lot harder for the states to say we violate a criminal statute, a state criminal statute, because whatever you claim to do in your official duties. But then again, if people get a hold of private information, it starts circulating around the private sector. That's a different ball game, and that could violate some state criminal statutes as well. And the state AGs could go to work on that.
I hope they're all going to work. I hope everybody is using every lever of our criminal and civil statute at this moment. Thank you so much, Richard Painter, for joining me today on Lights On and bringing your expertise. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
My pleasure. My pleasure.